Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire, and today we're going to talk about student workload. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
Well, my week, it has been really good in lots of ways, but one negative point was that the cats brought in another
snake.
Another snake, and so yet again, Eric was meeting with his boss, and I was screaming like a banshee in the background. So yeah, and we actually the cats got a fourth snake. But it was outside, and that was not as distressing to me. That was like, oh, there's a snake, okay, but
it's in the wild. The wild is where snakes should be.
Yes, and this one was like starting to do its unbelievably creepy slithering away. It was bigger, and I was just like, if this goes like under the couch or something, like we'll have to move out. Like I cannot live in a house knowing there's a snake hidden somewhere. So yes, so I wish the cats would find other ways to express their feelings of appreciation for us that don't.
Do they bring other animals in or just snakes?
They do, but for some reason it's just snake-a-palooza at the moment. It's just non-stop snakes. So
oh man.
Yeah. So tell me, how was your week? Hopefully snake-free.
Oh, it was good. Snake-free, yeah.
Good. That's always a good.
I had a bunch of advising meetings with students this week.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like this is the first year I have set up my advising meetings correctly. So I feel like it's an advising hack. So this is what I normally do. I normally send out, all the times I'm available in advising week and have them email me which slot they want. And then I just have like a million advising meetings randomly throughout the week. So this year I was thinking, gosh, I want to condense them somehow, and just have like 5 in a row. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I instead emailed them a smaller number of times that I was available and asked them to email me which of those they were available. And then, once I'd heard back from a bunch of people, I scheduled them right next to each other. And anyway, it was just so much nicer and smoother to have a whole bunch of them next to each other rather than, scattered throughout the week kind of weirdly.
I think it's nice. An unfortunate side effect of me just being so scattered at the moment. But I was like, what do you mean it's advising? Like, I just totally somehow did not remember that was a thing that we do as part of our job or that it was coming up. So I definitely found myself scrambling with not really a plan. So
usually what happens is some really on-the-ball advisee emails me to set up a meeting, and I'm like, oh, it's that time of the semester, and then I organize it. So that's what happened this semester.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. You always want like that, and it was always true like in my experience in primary school, there's always like a class helper, like the kid who always helps the teacher. And I have a few of those this semester who are like, you forgot to open the module. You're like, thank you. That's great. Like, and they just kind of keep you on it. So I appreciate that.
Is the homework supposed to be posted? Oh, yes. Let me go post it.
I know. And sometimes they're so sweet. Like, they're not like, hey, Dumbo, like, why haven't you posted the thing or whatever? They're like, were you planning on posting it? You're like
can't find it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just me not being able to find it. You're like, it's not you, it's definitely me, but thank you. So yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, tell me, have you got a quote for us for this week?
I do. And it's Roald Dahl.
Oh,
and
I love
not
that.
only is it Roald Dahl, but it's it's quoted in the Essentialism book, which is one of my favorite productivity mindset books of just doing fewer things well. So anyway, the quote is, "A little nonsense now and then is cherished by the wisest men."
Yeah.
And so just a reminder that it's important to do nonsense and play. And even if you are being essentialist, that does not mean to cut out play.
So true.
Love it. Yes.
So true. And Roald Dahl is just the best.
The best.
He is. Although my my oldest was like thinking about reading The Witches, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I read that when I was 8, and that book just terrified me
I
so
don't know if
bad.
I've read that one.
Oh man, brace yourself. Even actually the BFG, like
BFG.
I really remember reading it, and it got to a bit where it was saying this is the witching hour, and I was like, what is the witching hour? Like I was like so scared. So yeah, but The Witches, and I don't know. This is a whole other side thing about books for kids, but I think like the really successful books kind of acknowledge how much kids like a bit of dark, like his Harry Potter's really dark, really, like,
Yeah,
and Roald Dahl was a bit terrifying, but
totally.
yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and one of my favorite authors, Diana Wynne Jones, talks about how she writes for kids and adults, and she would say how she had to spell it out a little bit more for the adults. The kids, she was sure, would catch on all the details and understand
Oh
what it meant.
yeah,
And so she didn't have to spell it out quite as much when she was writing for kids. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I
I'm
really
sure that
like
they
Roald
pick up
Dahl's
on all the
books for
darkness.
grown-ups too are good.
Oh, I don't know if I've read those either. I'll have to read more Roald Dahl.
There's like the Tales of the Unexpected, where it's like these short stories, and yeah, yep.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Roald Dahl.
Yeah, so good, so good. But
So
terrifying.
student workload. What?
Oh, yeah.
What? Will you introduce us to this topic? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about it as what are our expectations of the students, and how much work are we expecting them to put in? In terms of, I was thinking about it in terms of specifically like graded work, like a kind of specific work that we're asking them for, rather than, yes, you should be, I don't know, thinking about the class or whatever.
Yeah, studying and doing whatever you need to do to retain the information.
Yeah, and it feels like for me it's really come up now, just thinking about adjustments that we should or could be making to kind of acknowledge that for us we're doing this online or distance learning or virtual teaching or environment, or just the stressors of that students are experiencing
Totally.
this semester, and how that should play out in terms of what we're asking them to do. And for me, this is a tricky subject.
Yeah, me too. And for me, I think this is a balance. I mean, obviously we're assigning the work to the students in order to help them learn the concepts of the class. So we don't want to just not do that, obviously. But I do think there's a balance where if we assign too much, then they don't put the time into the assignments that they need to optimally learn what they could from the assignments. So there's always a balance between too much and too few, and being intentional in the assignments, of course. And perhaps it's a different one when we're virtual and when there's a pandemic and who knows what else. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think another reason maybe this came up into our texting chats back and forth is because we got an email from the university sort of highlighting that we should be mindful about workload. And it was, as usual, I just want there to be a rule. So it wasn't quite specific enough for me about it. So that's part of my struggle, is figuring that out. But yeah, so in this case, so do you want to start with what's working?
Sure. So I've mentioned before I have regular due dates. So homework's always on Mondays. Lab reports are always a week after they finish the lab, so that's either on Tuesdays or Thursdays. And then I have components of their final project that's added into the mix near the end of the semester, and that's always on Fridays. So I try to have it be really regular so that even though there's a lot to do, of course, because it's this big class, hopefully they can get into a rhythm and always know that they always have to have this thing done by this time. And so that hopefully, even though it's the same amount of work as if they were scattered dates, it would hopefully be less mental space of keeping track of it all.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I do, or at least I think I do, is lighten the load a little bit at the end of the semester. And I don't tell them that I'm planning to do this. And I was talking with Ralph about this, and I'm not even sure if I really lighten it, and if you take into account the fact that they have to, of course, study for the final, and they have to finish their final project and stuff like that. But in terms of the recurring assignments of the lab reports and the homeworks, those do get easier in the last few weeks of the semester, and I kind of like that because they've been practicing their dedication with these this whole time, and now hopefully they go and they say, okay, man, I'm going to make this big lab report, and then it's a little bit easier than the previous ones, and I think that's I think that's a good confidence booster, and they've earned it because they've been getting better at them.
And I really think that's a good, and I don't think the reverse is a good plan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know it? And I don't think you can suddenly just pile on at the end.
Yeah.
After like setting it. So I think like when you have this expectation already built in and then it's like, oh, this one's a bit easier. Like that's just such a lovely reward. But if you did it the other way where they're like, oh, lab reports usually take me 20 minutes. And then what is
like,
this
oh,
thing?
3 hours later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I think that's perfect.
Cool. Yeah. And again, I don't know if probably their entire load for the class is not lightened, but it's hopefully that gives them more time to work on their final things that they need to do for the end of the class. So what's working for you with student workload?
Yeah, I guess now that you've said that, I didn't actually think I do that, but I do that. Like I never, cool. I don't have a whole bunch of stuff due at the end. Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, something else I'm thinking about that I'm gonna mention in the working on, but yeah, I think I am very flexible.
Okay.
And I'm very flexible with students about deadlines and things. So I think that's helps them manage their workload. And like, I'm receptive to that. And I think it definitely tapers off at the end. I don't have as much stuff. And one thing that I have decided to do in response to that email is I think I'm going to stop lab assignments after the break. So they kind of have one they're working on right now. And I think I'm going to just call it a day with that. And so there's that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I have that much for the working well section because I have things that I think do work, but there's nothing I feel super confident about.
Now, when you say you have flexible deadlines or you're flexible about that, is that true generally or specifically this semester? How does that? Are you more flexible this semester?
I'm way more flexible this semester. I think last semester, if a student missed a quiz in previous times, I think depending on what happened, I would possibly let them leave it out of their average. Mm-hmm. But now I'm emailing them and like, could you please do this for partial credit? Or, and like, it's a real struggle because I think, say with the reading assignments, they're something that is important to me to have in the kind of rhythm of the semester for them. And I mean, who knows what they get out of it, but just to have had the practice of opening the book and looking at what the chapter looks like and some of the variables before they hear me talk about it feels really, really important. And so I do want them to do that every week. Do you know what I mean?
So is that a stricter deadline?
So that in the past has been. At the moment it's almost don't tell them this, but like anything goes really. Like if they ask to do anything late, they're getting to do stuff late. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm doing too, and I have told them. Yeah. They just don't even need to tell me why they need more time. Just let me know that they need more time. Exception being exams, of course, and the end of the semester. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's felt really weird for me because normally I'm a very strict deadline kind of person. But a few people are very behind, but maybe they'll catch up. I'm not sure. I'll reserve judgment until the end of the semester about whether I like the flexible deadlines in general. But for this semester, they make sense to me.
Yeah, totally. And like, I mean, we've just been battling. I mean, like, we thought we had it rough with the pandemic, and then it was like, and like some people are being evacuated because of fires, and it's just been so chaotic and crazy.
Sure.
And so
lots of people losing internet access and losing power. And
and it doesn't make sense to. And generally, I have had most students, I think, I'm using this term, and I don't know if I should, like one-time. I was going to say offenders, but that's sort of really harsh and not, but they're one-time people who need,
right,
just need a break. And then, but if it does become habitual, it's not even that like I'm being a jerk about it. It's just not going to help.
It's not going to help.
And so, yeah. So
and that's what I put in my syllabus was, I do not recommend you fall behind on this class. Here are all these reasons why. However, if you need some flexibility, it's there.
Right, and I definitely have had a couple of cases this semester of people really struggling at the beginning because it just, and then they really got it together and it's just been totally plain sailing from then.
Totally.
So I'm really glad I didn't cut them off and,
Yeah, that's great.
Not kind of have that hope of sort of sticking with it. But so, yeah, it's tricky. For sure. So I have loads to say about working on, but why don't you go first?
Okay. I'm working on the size of assignments. So I often feel like I'm being helpful and split assignments down into pieces, like for their final project, they draft their introduction and they draft their methods and they do all these things separately and then later submit a full one. And then similarly, I had all these virtual lab assignments that I created as a substitute for them actually coming in and doing the lab face to face. And I didn't combine that with the lab report because it never used to be combined with the lab report. It was a separate thing that they did on the lab day. But anyway, all those things kind of added up to a lot of assignments that I think ends up potentially being an overwhelming number of assignments. Even if I'm trying to be helpful by breaking them into smaller pieces, I'm actually making so many pieces that it's stressful. So I'm trying to figure out what the right chunk is. Like, would it be better, working on spacing it into... I don't want them to be too small and have so many of them that I'm taking over their calendars with, there's always an assignment due for Claire's class every day. But I also think it's not too helpful to just be like, give me a final draft without, I kind of wanted to give them some structure along the way. So just kind of figuring out what the balance is and how many assignments is too many to where it blows into, gosh, there's too many assignments, The
thing that's so tricky about that, like, sometimes I'm saying this and I'm not applying this to myself, so I'll just say it to you. But like sometimes it's almost like whatever you believe is what you should commit, because I think you could make that argument. There's always going to be some people in the class who can just pull it together at the end and could just bust out the final report, and there's other people who really like love that scaffolding. And so I don't like, sometimes my biggest downfall in semesters is when I really pretzel myself to popular opinion. And as much as, I think you should absolutely be responsive and I think it's really important, but sometimes I just create so many headaches for myself.
Yeah. And
I will tell you about one that I've just created now.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, one I've created now is I told the students I'm not going to do the last 3 labs as lab reports and some student was like, but I want there to be labs. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll make this extra project for you, which is just so, like, why did I do that?
It's too much, yeah.
Right, and like, yeah, it just is, I really wish I hadn't said that. But, yes, but, so it's tricky, but I think if you have a thing you're doing, I don't know why I'm taking over you're working on, but I wish for me that I could like almost factor in a piece of time where I'm going to talk to myself about why I believe this is the right decision.
Yes.
And just go with that, because I think, so I'm not answering your question, but I think you could poll the class and find students either end. But I think secretly, I believe the better thing for them is to make the chunks. And that some of them would be like, I could do this on one night. I could just get it all done at the end. And it wouldn't be very good if they did.
Sure. And the reason that we're doing chunks is, that they try the introduction, and then if they accidentally wrote a whole bunch of methods in the introduction, well, now they can put them in their first draft of the methods. I feel comfortable with how I decided to scaffold the final project. But then, like earlier this week, I looked at all the assignments due this week, and just the way it worked out, there were a bunch. And I said, okay, and I ended up cutting one of those in-lab assignments so they weren't doing a substitute for actually doing the lab hands-on. They were just going straight to the lab report. But I felt like, I feel like you have to listen, like you're saying, what makes sense to me, what feels right to me. And to me, it felt like there were too many things due this week. And so I said, okay, we won't do that one. And I didn't open the possibility for anyone to comment on it. I just wrote it on the schedule and crossed it out, and it was gone.
I think that's perfect. And I think... Yeah, but I think, I don't know, I struggle with this too, because there's so many things that are replacing in-class time stuff.
Yes.
That I've now had to turn into assignments, so it does feel like I'm...
Right.
But...
And it's hard to, because the lectures, even going to lecture, you're still sitting at your computer, but... Right. We normally would have 6 hours a week of lab, so I felt perfectly legitimate adding these in-lab assignments, and I do think they make sense, and I still stand behind them, but it does get confusing with the number of assignments. So I think, one thing I might do if I'm teaching this class virtually again is put the virtual assignment as part of the lab report. Like the lab report's a little bit bigger.
So it's under that umbrella.
It's
so
under
it just
that
shows
umbrella.
up one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, which means it's going to take longer. It's a bigger assignment, but it's one umbrella, and you still have a week to work on it, which is the same amount of time that you had. It just isn't broken into 2 chunks. I think people would be less overwhelmed with the number of assignments, or at least I would feel like I'm burdening them less if I did that, you know?
Yeah, I totally get that. That sounds reasonable.
So what are you working on?
Oh, Jude. Yeah, I think balance is something that I'm really struggling with. Like, just like that, where I was like, guess what? Everyone's going to be so pleased. We're going to have less labs. And someone's like, but I want labs. And you're like, oh my God. Like, it's, so like, I think the thing that I've been really reflecting on is, which is so hard, but fundamentally assignments are not a punishment. Like, there's nothing that I'm assigning that is just busy work.
No, like we are assigning to learn the material. Obviously.
Right, and I think if those assignments went away completely, it really would impact student learning.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And even with the labs I'm getting rid of, I am doing that knowing that some people are really those kind of learners where they finally really get something when they see it. In this case, it's a simulation and it's not really, but they still, it like helps their understanding in some way. So it's really hard when you're thinking about that to think, what would I get rid of? You know what I mean? And I think, so yeah, it's, and I think I have some things that are going to make next semester easier. But I do think it's really important for me to have these lecture quizzes to kind of motivate people to watch the lectures. And I do think it's important to have these homeworks where they have to write work problems sort of longhand. And so, yeah. And I think, so I don't know. I think when I'm thinking about getting rid of stuff, it's hard because I think it will actually impact their understanding. And then I'm still going to maybe have a final with the same stuff on there. So is it actually helping ultimately? So
yeah, well, it's definitely worth thinking about. I mean, if we are at the point, like I'm talking about this balance where if we give them too much compared to, how much the average student can do, then they aren't going to do it as well, and then they aren't going to get as much out of it. So if we're at that point where we, for a variety of circumstances, we are too far in having too much assignments for them to get the maximum out, then the cool thing about choosing which assignments to cut is we get to choose what they are missing instead of it happening naturally by what they have time for and what made sense enough for them to do. So that's kind of a positive way of we get to choose what they're actually going to work on by selecting the assignments.
Yeah, true.
But I know what you mean. Like, I don't want to cut any of my assignments. They're all there for very important reasons.
Right, and I actually had this I mean, it might go away again, but I had this big surge of optimism last week because there's something that it's this really small point in physics, like in this class that I teach. And I feel like I always fail to fully get that point across.
Okay.
And it was something that I really put in the lecture quiz explicitly as, what was I saying about this process?
Okay.
And they all had written it in and everyone had gotten that right. And then I gave a quiz on it the following week that I feel like way more people got right than they normally do.
Well, great.
And I was like, whoa, is this actually not a complete and total train wreck? Have I actually imparted some knowledge? And so, yeah. So I definitely, I don't know. And I think what I'm talking about is not even other people telling me what I should do, but my own immediate response is we should get rid of all the assignments and give students an easy semester. But then when you actually are like, well,
no,
they still have to do physics too. And I don't want to set them up for failure in that. And then, so it's.
They're here to learn physics 1. So, I mean, it's a disservice to them if they
totally
don't learn physics 1 after doing everything.
Totally. So I think, it's definitely food for thought. But I think that it is really important, like you said, having that flexibility, but also not piling stuff on at the end.
Yeah.
Is really, yeah.
Interesting.
And also because I don't want to be grading a bunch of stuff at the very end. Seriously, though.
That is very important considered. I know I normally give a multiple choice test for the final, which I'm not probably going to do this time, which means I have to grade a non-multiple choice test for the final. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I agree. I don't want to cut assignments because they're so valuable. But, this is what I wanted to ask you. So you're finding value potentially in having that quiz, the lecture quizzes.
Right.
Is that something you might continue to do once you're giving the lectures in person? Or
that's
what do you
something I'm wondering about. Like, is that... I could imagine... Because what I would love them to do with the lecture quizzes that they have is to have it open and then just be like looking at it and then trying to hear those things when I say them.
Like they're sitting in class and they have the quiz open?
Well, so, I mean, for me, at the moment, my lectures are recorded. Mm-hmm. And so what I've been trying to tell them to do is don't watch all the lectures and then go and do the quiz, because some of the things are like small points. But read those questions, then watch the lectures with those questions in mind.
Okay.
So I wonder, is that a thing I could do during class?
I think that's a great idea. They could have a little sheet of paper with the questions on it, and they're just watching for you to say those. It could even be funny, because everyone's like, oh, that's one of the things.
Right. But it definitely, for some reason, the process of typing out these steps, I don't know, it seems like it made it stick in their head better.
That's great.
This time, so yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm into it. So yeah, workload, it's tricky, and I think it's something that at first glance it seems straightforward to me, like, yay, students love less work, let's do that, but then it's not actually...
Yeah, totally. And there's a lot of, I mean, aside from the assignments being a key part of the learning, I think it's something really satisfying about finding a tricky assignment and working your way through it and getting through. And so I don't want to deprive them of that either.
I think I've sort of shared on here before, and I really can't speak to what it's like in Ireland right now, but when I was an undergrad, you were very much left alone for the most part. And so I've been in that system, and it's hard. It's really hard. It feels great at the time when you don't have any homework to, but then at the end, it's a big pile-on of stuff. So
sure.
I think, yeah.
And you don't get any feedback about whether you are learning the important stuff or not. Yeah.
Continuous assessment is the way to go. So yeah, but I think maybe don't be a jerk. Is what
Continuous assessment, but don't be a jerk. I think that's a good takeaway for this.
I still want to do our merch idea of your. I would love your T-shirt. I'm the queen of medium-sized tasks. That's still like
I love medium-sized tasks.
Yeah, but maybe I could have my own like plaque or something.
Yes, definitely.
Don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk.
That's what I'm shooting for.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, and then we also have seize the summer. Those are our phrases right
now. Seize the summer, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ruth. And thanks, Ralph.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.